The sun hung low over the Wyoming prairies, painting the endless grassland in shades of gold and amber. 17-year-old Samuel McKenna guided his small flock of sheep back toward the modest wooden cabin he shared with his widowed mother, Martha. The wind carried the scent of wild sage and the distant promise of rain. Samuel had always been different from the other boys in their small frontier settlement. Where others saw opportunity for profit, he saw creatures in need. Where others built walls, he extended hands. His mother often worried that his gentle heart would be his downfall in this harsh land where survival demanded toughness. As the sheep bleated softly around him, Samuel noticed movement near a cluster of weathered rocks. A dog lay motionless, its dark fur matted with dried blood. The animal's ribs showed clearly through its coat, and one of its legs was twisted at an unnatural angle. "Easy, boy," Samuel whispered, approaching slowly. The dog lifted its head weakly, revealing intelligent amber eyes that seemed to hold depths of pain and exhaustion. Most settlers would have put the animal out of its misery, but Samuel knelt beside it, his calloused hands gentle as he examined the wounds. The dog bore markings Samuel had never seen before, intricate patterns that seemed almost deliberate in their placement. A leather cord around its neck held a small carved bone pendant that caught the dying light. "Ma's not going to like this," Samuel murmured to himself, carefully lifting the injured animal. The dog whimpered but didn't struggle, as if sensing the boy's intentions. Inside their one-room cabin, Martha McKenna looked up from her mending as her son entered carrying his unexpected burden. Her weathered face, marked by years of prairie wind and worry, creased with concern. "Samuel, what on earth? He's hurt, Ma. I couldn't just leave him." Samuel's voice carried the quiet determination that Martha knew meant no argument would change his mind. She sighed, setting aside her needle. "We barely have enough food for ourselves, son. I'll give him part of my portion." Samuel was already preparing a makeshift bed near the stone hearth, using old blankets Martha had been saving for winter. As night fell over the prairie, Samuel tended to the dog with the same care he showed his sheep. He cleaned the wounds with precious water from their well, shared his meager dinner of bread and dried meat, and spoke in soothing tones that seemed to calm the animal's distress. "You're not from around here, are you?" he asked, gently stroking the dog's head. The animal's eyes never left his face, and Samuel felt a strange connection, as if the creature understood every word. Martha watched her son from across the room, her heart swelling with both pride and worry. In the flickering firelight, she could see the same compassion that had defined her late husband, the quality that had made him beloved by their community, but had also led him to take risks that ultimately claimed his life. Outside, the prairie wind howled through the gaps in their cabin walls, but inside, three souls found unexpected comfort in each other's presence. Samuel fell asleep on the floor beside the dog, one hand resting protectively on the animal's head. The dog's amber eyes remained open long into the night, watching the boy who had shown him kindness. In those depths flickered something that went beyond mere gratitude, a recognition that this act of compassion had set forces in motion that would change everything. Samuel woke to a silence so complete it seemed to press against his eardrums. Even the ever-present prairie wind had stilled. The dog beside him was alert, its amber eyes fixed on the small window that faced east. Rising quietly to avoid waking his mother, Samuel peered through the glass. What he saw made his blood turn to ice water in his veins. Warriors, hundreds of them. They sat motionless on painted horses in a perfect circle around the cabin, their presence so absolute it seemed to bend reality itself. War paint streaked their faces in patterns of red and black. Eagle feathers adorned their hair, lances pointed skyward like a forest of deadly trees. Samuel's hands trembled as he counted. 50, 100, more than he could process. The morning mist seemed to part around them, as if even nature acknowledged their authority over this land. "Ma," he whispered urgently, his voice barely audible. Martha stirred, then sat up abruptly as she saw her son's face. "What is it?" "Don't move sudden-like," Samuel said, his throat dry as dust. "But look outside." Martha's intake of breath was sharp enough to cut glass. In 17 years of frontier life, she had heard stories, rumors, whispered warnings around trading post fires. But nothing had prepared her for this reality. The warriors made no sound, no war cries, no threatening gestures. They simply waited with the patience of stones, their horses occasionally stamping or snorting, but otherwise as still as their riders. "The dog," Martha breathed, understanding flooding her features. "Samuel, what have we done?" The injured animal had risen despite its wounds and now sat perfectly straight, its posture transformed from the broken creature of the night before. The carved bone pendant around its neck seemed to glow in the early morning light. Samuel's mind raced through everything he knew about the local tribes, fragments gathered from travelers, traders, and his mother's stories. The Lakota had sacred animals, spirit guides that held meaning beyond the physical world. But this knowledge felt inadequate, like trying to understand a thunderstorm by examining a single raindrop. "Maybe they just want their dog back," Samuel said, though his voice lacked conviction. Martha moved to the window, her movement slow and deliberate. She had lived on the frontier long enough to know that sudden movements could trigger violence. What she saw in the warriors' faces wasn't anger or aggression, but something far more complex, a mixture of solemnity, curiosity, and what might have been respect. The lead warrior, distinguished by additional feathers and intricate beadwork, raised his hand, not in greeting or threat, but in acknowledgement. He had seen them at the window. "They know we're awake," Martha whispered. Samuel knelt beside the dog, which turned its intelligent amber eyes to meet his. "I don't understand what's happening, but I'm not sorry I helped you," he said softly. As if responding to his words, the dog moved to the door and sat facing it, waiting. "I think," Samuel said, his voice steadier than he felt, "they want to talk." Martha's weathered hands found her son's shoulders. "Your father always said that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's doing what's right despite the fear." Samuel nodded, drawing strength from her touch and his father's remembered wisdom. Whatever lay beyond their door would determine not just their fate, but possibly the future of their entire settlement. The dog's amber eyes seemed to hold approval as Samuel reached for the door handle. Outside, 200 warriors waited in perfect silence for a 17-year-old boy to step into a moment that would define the rest of his life. Samuel's hand hesitated on the wooden door handle as his heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. Through the thin walls, he could hear the soft breathing of the horses and the occasional creak of leather, but no human sounds. The warriors waited with supernatural patience. "Stay behind me, Ma," he whispered, though they both knew that if violence erupted, there would be nowhere to hide. The door opened with a prolonged creak that seemed to echo across the prairie. Samuel stepped onto the rough wooden threshold, the injured dog moving beside him despite its wounds. The morning air was crisp and carried scents of sage, horse sweat, and something else. Burning sweetgrass, he realized. The lead warrior sat straight-backed on a magnificent paint horse, its coat a canvas of white and deep brown. The man's face was weathered like ancient leather, marked with scars that spoke of battles survived and wisdom earned. His dark eyes held depths that seemed to measure Samuel's soul. Behind him, the circle of warriors remained motionless. Some held bows, others carried lances decorated with feathers and beads, but no weapons were raised in threat. Their horses, too, seemed to understand the gravity of the moment, standing with an almost ceremonial stillness. The lead warrior spoke in a language Samuel didn't understand, his voice carrying across the prairie like distant thunder. The words were rhythmic, formal, weighted with ceremony. When he finished, silence returned like a held breath. Samuel found his voice, though it came out rougher than he intended. I don't speak your language, sir." But I think this dog belongs to you." The warrior's eyes moved to the animal beside Samuel, and for the first time his expression shifted. Something that might have been surprise, or perhaps recognition of something unexpected, crossed his features. He spoke again, this time in heavily accented but clear English. "This is White Paw, sacred companion of our medicine woman. 3 days ago during the storm, we have searched without rest." Samuel felt the pieces beginning to form a picture, though he still couldn't see the whole image. "He was hurt when I found him. I couldn't leave him to suffer. You fed him." It wasn't a question. Samuel nodded. "Part of my supper. It wasn't much, but—" The warrior raised his hand, silencing him. He then spoke rapidly in his own language to the circle of men around him. Samuel caught what sounded like debate, voices rising and falling in discussion he couldn't follow. Martha stepped closer to her son, her presence a comfort even in this moment of ultimate uncertainty. The dog, White Paw, looked up at Samuel with those amber eyes that now seemed to hold recognition and something deeper. The lead warrior dismounted with fluid grace despite his apparent age. Several other warriors did the same, creating a smaller circle of men on foot, while the others remained mounted. The leader approached slowly, stopping just out of arm's reach. "I am Chief Stone Bear of the Oglala Lakota," he said with formal dignity. "This sacred animal carries the spirit of our ancestors. When he is lost, our people's connection to the spirit world is broken." Samuel felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders like a heavy blanket. "I didn't know. I'm sorry if You cared for him when he was wounded and hungry," Stone Bear interrupted. "You shared your food when you had little. You tended his injuries with gentle hands." The chief's weathered face was unreadable. "This is not the action of an enemy." The morning sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the prairie grass. Samuel could feel the attention of 200 warriors focused on this moment, on whatever decision was being weighed in the balance. "But," Stone Bear continued, his voice taking on a harder edge, "White Paw was stolen from our camp by raiders 2 weeks ago. We have tracked them across 3 territories. The trail led here, to your settlement." The implication hit Samuel like a physical blow. Someone in their community was involved in stealing sacred animals from the Lakota. The wounded dog he had found wasn't just lost. It was the center of a conflict that could destroy everything he knew. Chief Stone Bear's next words confirmed his worst fears. "The men who took White Paw are in your settlement, and now, young shepherd, you must help us decide what justice looks like." The weight of Chief Stone Bear's words settled over the prairie like gathering storm clouds. Samuel felt the ground shifting beneath his feet as the full scope of the situation became clear. His simple act of kindness had placed him at the center of a conflict that could determine the fate of his entire community. "I don't know anything about raiders or stolen animals," Samuel said, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through his veins. "I only found White Paw yesterday evening, hurt and alone." Stone Bear studied him with eyes that seemed to see through flesh and bone to the truth beneath. After a long moment, he nodded slowly. "Your words ring with honesty, young shepherd. But the trail of the thieves ends at your settlement. 3 men on horseback, carrying White Paw in a cage." Martha stepped forward, her maternal instincts overriding her fear. "Chief Stone Bear, my son speaks the truth. He's never harmed a living creature in his life. If there are thieves in our settlement, they've hidden their crimes from honest folks." The chief's attention shifted to Martha, and Samuel saw a flicker of respect in those dark eyes. "You have raised a son with a good heart, woman. But good hearts do not always prevent the actions of evil men." White Paw limped forward, positioning himself between Samuel and the circle of warriors. The dog's amber eyes seemed to glow in the morning light as he looked up at Stone Bear and gave a soft whine. The chief knelt beside the sacred animal, placing a weathered hand on the dog's head. They seemed to communicate in a way that transcended words. After several moments, Stone Bear rose and spoke rapidly to his warriors in Lakota. The response was immediate and intense. Voices rose in what sounded like heated debate. Some warriors gestured toward the settlement, others toward Samuel and Martha. The tension stretched like a bowstring pulled to its breaking point. Finally, Stone Bear raised his hand for silence. When he spoke, his words were measured and final. White Paw has spoken. The boy's kindness has created a debt that must be honored, but the thieves must still face justice. Samuel felt a moment of relief, quickly followed by renewed dread. What kind of justice? By our law, the punishment for stealing a sacred animal is death, Stone Bear said without emotion. But White Paw asks for mercy because of your actions, so we offer a choice. The chief gestured toward the settlement, where smoke was beginning to rise from morning cooking fires, unaware of the drama unfolding on their doorstep. Give us the 3 men who stole White Paw, and your people will live in peace. Refuse, and we will take them by force, and your settlement will suffer for harboring thieves. Samuel's mind raced. He thought of the Hartwell brothers, rough men who had arrived in the settlement 3 weeks ago, claiming to be prospectors. They kept to themselves, had more money than their story explained, and their horses always seemed nervous and skittish. But suspicion wasn't proof. I can't just accuse people without evidence, Samuel said, but if you give me time, maybe I can find out the truth. Stone Bear's expression remained impassive. The sun will travel from here to there. He pointed from the eastern horizon to directly overhead. When it reaches the center of the sky, we will have our answer. Justice delayed is justice denied. As if to emphasize the deadline, Martha looked toward the settlement and gasped. Samuel, look. People were emerging from their cabins, drawn by the sight of the massive gathering. Samuel could see his neighbors, the Johnsons, old Pete the blacksmith, the Hartwell brothers, and others, standing in their doorways, staring at the circle of warriors. They're afraid, Samuel said, stating the obvious. Fear makes men do foolish things, Stone Bear replied. Your people may try to fight. This would be unfortunate. Samuel understood the threat beneath the diplomatic words. If shooting started, it wouldn't matter who was guilty or innocent. The warriors had overwhelming numbers and the element of surprise. Let me go to them, Samuel said. Let me try to find the truth and prevent bloodshed. Stone Bear considered this, then nodded slowly. You have until the sun reaches the center of the sky. But know this, young shepherd, your compassion has earned you the right to try, but it cannot change what justice demands. The guilty will pay, one way or another. As Samuel prepared to walk into his settlement and confront the most difficult morning of his life, White Paw looked up at him with those knowing amber eyes. The dog had been saved by kindness, but now that same kindness had to find a way to save an entire community. The morning sun climbed steadily toward its zenith, marking the passage of time toward a reckoning that would test everything Samuel believed about right, wrong, and the true cost of doing what was right. Behind him, 200 warriors waited with the patience of stone, while ahead, his neighbors faced a choice between truth and destruction. And in the center of it all, a 17-year-old shepherd boy carried the weight of both worlds on his shoulders. The story would continue based on the choices made in the next few hours. Choices that would echo across the prairie for generations to come, proving that sometimes the smallest acts of compassion can reshape the destiny of entire communities.